What's up, everybody? Introductory speech. How's everybody doing? Miami, how are you? I just, I'm taking a class in public speaking right now, and I just watched a really interesting video on public speaking for my class. And the video that I watched for it just now was on growth mindset. And it was actually really good, and I think it has a lot to do with why I have continued to try to be teachable and to continue to learn and think critically about the society and about the economic system we live in. And the opposite of a growth mindset. Have you sharded yourself lately? Yeah, fortunately, no. But the opposite of a growth mindset is a fixed mindset. And unfortunately, what a lot of people have in the United States is a fixed mindset. We are taught what we are taught in school, in the media, by our families, and a lot of us don't really we don't really think critically about what we were taught, and we just kind of go on with that. And we don't really question the world around us. We don't question what our family believes, the media, education system, or we question it in a different way, in the wrong way. You know, part of what I just learned in the growth mindset as opposed to the fixed mindset is, I'll just read you some of these things right now, is view challenges as opportunities. I definitely just kind of naturally was able to do that. I struggled a lot as a kid with learning disabilities and other issues, and I knew that if I don't continue to try to grow, are you talking leftists or just liberals? I could talk to a leftist. Um, But view challenges, opportunities. I definitely had a lot of learning disabilities and issues growing up. And I knew that if I don't continue to try to improve myself, I'm going to fail and I'm not going to, I'm going to have a very difficult life. Um, Prioritize learning over seeking approval. That's something that I definitely did. Focus on the process instead of the end result. That really makes me think of the idea of progress, not perfection. Yeah, Summit Ice, Nathan, for you. I've always really strived for progress, not perfection in my life. I don't strive for perfection because I know I will never attain it. But I always try to be teachable. I always try to be curious. And I always try to be critical of the world around me and also what I believe. And if, I consider myself a leftist, but we are always questioning ourselves. We are always debating within our kind of democratic socialism will make a better America. Okay, make mistakes not mean you're a failure. I know I made a lot of mistakes in my early 20s and my late teens. I got fired from a few jobs, and it was really hard. A couple of those jobs because I didn't think. Let's go, Brandon. Of course, one of those jobs was really hard because I really wanted that job, and I had to turn that into a learning experience and take a look at where was I wrong and what could I do better. Um, Learn from the mistakes of others. Absolutely. I know that when I was at my current job, I'm in the medical profession, and I've been at the job I'm at now for like 15 years. I worked with a lot of bad people. I worked with a lot of people who did not give high quality medical care, had terrible bedside matter. and I learned from their mistakes, so I didn't make that same mistake. Cultivate grit. I like that because in order to survive in capitalism, you have to have grit. This is, it makes me think of like hustle culture that so many people have these days. Like, what is your hustle within this system? Because as it is now, if you just are going to graduate high school and even graduate college and just get a job anywhere, you're going to have struggles unless daddy's rich. And not that I approve of hustle culture. I don't think there should be. I think that people should be able to, as they used to, graduate school, get a job, and support themselves and have their basic needs met. That's the kind of society I wish we could live in. But right now, you have to have grit. You have to be tough. You have to be able to persevere in the society in order to survive, in order to thrive. Set a new goal for every milestone you achieve. That's really cool. And that's what I'm doing right now. I am 39 years old. I've been in the job that I have had for the past, like I said, 15 years. And I went back to college about a year and a half ago to get a new degree. And I've really enjoyed going to school as an adult. It's a lot different because now I can add my personal experience to a lot of we need Yang, and fuck that UBI. But setting goals as an adult is really cool because I could attach my personal experience. Writing papers is a lot of fun. Yes, I love Nathan For You. Nathan For You makes me laugh hard. You know what I mean? Like, I'll fall out of my chair laughing so hard. And I can rewatch those episodes over and over again. The thing funny about Nathan For You is like, I'll show a friend Nathan For You, and I'll be like, watch this is so funny. And the friend will be like, and I'm like, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. And they're like, it's funny, but I'm like, I don't know. Nathan For You like makes my belly hurt, my chest hurt from laughing so much. Let me just go. Remember that it takes time to succeed in anything. And like I said in the beginning, I had learning disabilities. I was like a troubled young man. And when I decided to turn my life around, I knew that it was going to be a process. I failed out of college at 19 years old. I went back. I did well. I got fired from job. I just really struggled. And at a point, I felt like I'm going to have a very hard life. And then I kind of got my shit together and I decided to persevere. I decided to work extra hard, study extra hard. I decided to always be critical of myself in a healthy way, be critical of the world around me, to continue reading books. I still read mad books. I need to get a new bookshelf. If I'm not a liberal, I'm a socialist. And that this is going to take time, and that I'm still not done growing. I'm still not done on my journey in whatever that's going to be. I'm sorry this chat gave you diarrhea, but you're more than welcome to jump in and just do the regular old debate. That's kind of what I came in for. What do you consider a liberal? Liberals are people who are, well, in the American sense of the word, they're people that support, progressive liberalism, the Democrats, centrists. I even consider a lot of Republicans liberals because liberalism really emerged out of feudalism as the ideology that supports capitalism. There are a lot of liberals, like progressive liberals, who do care about others and are not like pathological individualists. And that's cool. And, those who I'd like to speak with. Brandon, 1. What is your opinion on the BLM movement? I think Black lives won't matter until, what is the term? All lives won't matter until Black lives matter. I think that I went to Black Lives Matter rallies. I went to marches. I helped participate in the organizing of one. I helped organize a counter protest to a Blue Lives Matter rally, which was really interesting and kind of scary. So yeah, Black Lives Matter, man. It's only in the United States that something a movement that people are just saying, hey, we just want to be treated equally, turns into you want to have more than me. It's absolutely absurd. He stands with the brothers and sisters. He might be valid. Yeah, man, of course. There's a saying, you can't just be an ally, you have to be an advocate. My UBI stance, yeah, I don't support UBI under capitalism. I think, especially under American capitalism, because as Milton Friedman wrote, he said, we can use UBI as a Trojan horse to erode the existing social safety net. So unemployment insurance, WIC, Social Security, all of that, we give these people cash, okay? And then we erode the social safety net. And that cash is not tied to inflation. So say, right away people start getting $1,000, $2,000 cash. Inflation is increasing. Is that cash assistance going to be tied to inflation? Because in a few years, that cash will have less value. So ultimately, it's worked in like Europe and social democracies. But in the United States, I'm just very concerned with that. I think something like UBI would be great within a different kind of economic system. Because I think with automation moving ahead as rapidly as it is, we're going to have to redefine the definition of work. We already have much more workers and people in the working class than there are good paying jobs. And that's only going to decrease with things like automation. So we need to have this kind of discussion. Yeah, socialism is the only way, man. At least socialism is the path. What does Marxism mean? Marxism means that you, and let me define it like this. A Marxist does not think of Marx the way other like people follow a religion. Okay, nobody is like worshiping Marx. Nobody thinks that Marx was a great man. Marx was a guy who developed and combined certain economic theories and principles that a lot of us have taken and learned from and have also moved forward. Different people have built upon the writings of Marx. Marx mainly gave a critique of capitalism, and his critique is still, for the most part, very valid. But then Engels, Frederick Engels built on that, Lenin, Trotsky, and all these other guys built on top of that. I'd rather not call myself a Marxist because that eludes people to think of what we call great man theory. And a lot of Americans are very guilty of this great man and believing, we don't think of any of these people as the great men. We just think of these as people that we've learned ideas from. So yeah, Norway prisons are the future. The funny thing about Norway, and you have great comments and questions, eridicted, or however you say it. But, the social democracies of Northern Europe have done some great things. And when I think of UBI, I think of how they have allowed artists and musicians to use something like a UBI. And if you say you guys want to start a band, a bunch of you guys are musicians, you want to start a band, make music, because there are just not enough jobs to go around. If you're showing that you're productive and you're making music and you're actually producing in your art, the state will provide for you and meet your basic needs in a sort of UBI. But that UBI is attached to some type of productivity, which I think is great. I think ultimately people do want to be productive. We have in our nature that we do want to get up and do something and produce something for society. Where is that money coming from? The money is coming from probably a fiat currency like what we use now. Since 1971, the U.S. has used a fiat currency. So it's a very easy question to answer. The money comes from new money since we've gotten off the gold standard. Trump lemmings are poor. Okay. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? That's an interesting quote. I'd like to know where that comes from. What if we remove the welfare system totally in favor of UBI? No. It's called taxes. Okay, just print it. It's not about printing money. It's about funding programs for the people instead of funding things that do not serve the people, like a totally out of control military that has 800 bases around the world, subsidies for companies that do not need it, that just lobby Congress and the government for more money when they already have more money and power than we could imagine. Tax cuts for people that are parasites on the working class. So a lot can be done to redirect public funds for the people. And that's not really, it has given and taken, not take, yeah. Thank you guys for the follow. Like funding gain of function research and exterminating on puppies. Interesting. The only thing that happens when the government prints and gives to the people is banks make less. Yeah, okay. Well, the military stops other countries from invading us. That's the kind of important. Who's trying to invade the U.S.? Because the U.S. military has invaded almost every country in Latin America. The U.S. military invaded Iraq based on lies. I don't know if you're old enough to have been there as an adult like I was. I was in my late teens, early 20s for the play-by-play of the Iraq War, in the uncovering of the total lie that the executive branch even lied and pressured the CIA, who usually loves going to war and overthrowing governments. The lie is that the U.S. military is keeping us safe. And what they really do is invade poor countries, colonize them, overthrow their governments, bring in U.S. companies, extract their natural resources, and tell the American people, we just took out a bad guy and everything's going to be good now. I remember when the U.S. invaded Iraq, people were like, man, we're going to get cheap oil now. That's at least, I mean, we fought a war based on complete lies. We're killing millions of Iraqis, thousands of U.S. service members, but at least we're going to get cheap oil, right? When private companies go into a foreign country and steal their oil, that money doesn't go to the people. That money doesn't trickle down to the people. That money goes to those companies. And the companies get rich and the shareholders get rich. But the thing about capitalism is, if you've ever invested, and I have, if you put money into, say, Exxon stock or Enron stock or any of these companies, and you make tons of money, their shareholders are going to want more money next year. They're going to want an increasing return on the investment. And next year, if that stock price goes down, the shareholders are very, very, very angry. And that is the parasitic nature of capitalism that requires more and more and more. And the U.S. military is a part of that process of invading other countries. And all we have to say is, look, this country is ruled by a bad guy. We got to take him out. We got to take him out. It's for our safety. Meanwhile, nobody is invading the U.S. Nobody is invading the U.S. Nobody wants to invade the U.S. And we tell these young kids, who a lot of times live in small towns and have no other opportunities. They graduate high school, the options are work at Walmart, work at Amazon, work in restaurants, or go to the military and make a career. And of course, they don't know the history of U.S. aggression of poor countries. They don't know. And they believe that we're just protecting America. And they go. And then they get indoctrinated in God and country. They get indoctrinated in a lot of fascist ideas, authoritarian ideas. They will invade a poor country that has no intent of attacking the United States, and they will believe that they're protecting Americans back home. How do you get socialism to work if it never has worked? Mike, thank you for the question. The idea that socialism has never worked is not correct. Socialism has worked in big and small situations. Right now, Bolivia, in the last 15 years, has elected a socialist legislature and president. And they've cut poverty in half. Literacy has increased 80%. Life expectancy has increased. Workers' rights and conditions for workers, their pay, has increased. And they are building socialism, and they didn't do it by revolution or any violence. Although in 2019, there was a coup that the US backed. A right-wing coup that overthrew their democratically elected government and brought in a right-wing religious extremist government. And this government held elections the next year. And when they had these elections, that government lost in a landslide. In that year, they had 3 massacres, killing hundreds of people. They imprisoned hundreds of people. They imprisoned people for Facebook posts. And I'm going to bring up Venezuela. Venezuela, before they started going on sanctions, also cut poverty in half. Literacy went up. The educational system improved. Life expectancy went up. But then the United States and Saudi Arabia agreed to plummet the oil prices because Venezuela was charging less for a barrel of oil than any other country. Venezuela had a program to provide free oil for poor people in the United States. They were giving free oil to Haiti. They gave free oil to most poor countries free. And then sanctions came and the country just imploded. I'll talk about the USSR real quick. And I critically support the experiment that was the USSR. When they had their revolution in 1917, they knew that if they just built socialism in that one country, it was going to really struggle, because what they were trying to do was transition from a feudal society controlled by a czar and build socialism from that. When socialism really comes from a advanced, technological, well-educated capitalist country. So they were trying to skip all these processes, skip all these steps. And they industrialized super fast, and in 30 years, they were the number 2 superpower in the world, the first country to go into outer space, of course, cut poverty in half. They went from having absolute zero democracy to having a council democratic system. That's what Soviet means. They elect councils. So they went from zero democracy to a different form of democracy. What's being debated is like politics. And but then they struggled. They created too much bureaucracy. They bankrupt due to the Cold War. And but there's a lot to learn from it. Only picks pieces, makes my head hurt. No, I'm going through different experiments. This one gentleman asked me to talk about when socialism has ever worked. I'll talk about one more in a smaller situation. I have a coworker from Israel, and his parents grew up in a kibbutz. A kibbutz is a socialist type of commune, but they're all over Israel. And I didn't even know this, but we were just talking, and he goes, I know socialism worked because my parents grew up in a kibbutz. And some of these kibbutzes have hundreds of thousands of people within society. So, in a large scale or small scale, they work. Hey, I'm going to be talking to Jake.
Hey, what's up?
Jake, hey, how are
Uh,
you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I guess I should start off by saying I'm not actually a liberal. I think there's a lot of uh, a misconception that liberals and leftists find themselves in the same group. Whereas, I mean, from my point of view, I see liberals have a lot more capitalist sympathies. Um, they don't
Yeah.
necessarily uh, believe in for instance, the exploitative nature of employment, and I can get into further detail as to what I mean about that. But it really just depends on like where you want to steer the conversation.
Well, I think it sounds like you are not a liberal and not a conservative.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay, cool. Well, why don't you talk about the exploitative nature of capitalism and how liberals kind of support the fundamentals of capitalism while also wanting to have a more fair and just society and that just not really working together.
So I guess to start off with, I'd play this scenario out for a lot of people because not a lot of people recognize that, here in the United States, we don't really have homesteading rights anymore. Back during Manifest Destiny and after the war with Mexico, in which we acquired California, Oregon, Washington, all those areas. It used to be that if you wanted to, you could take your wagon and horse carriage all the way out to anywhere bumfuck Egypt and make a house and farm for yourself, and that was fine and dandy. And then money that would cost to buy that land from the government was uh, easily accessible. Um, but because we don't really have that kind of system in place anymore, that you can't homestead anymore, if you actually wanted to leave society to go have your own and provide for yourself without actually interacting with society, you're thereby
Hmm.
forced to immerse yourself in some kind of employment. And the reason why and to further that argument, I would also say that nobody has employment unless it is profitable to somebody offering employment. I mean, why would you add
Right,
on a
right,
worker to your workplace if they were going to be a net cost on your business?
right. You know what it makes me think about is what it makes me think about is when people say, if you uh, if you don't like capitalism, just go into the woods or something like that, and
Hmm.
just build your own little society there. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I wish more people would talk about that because I do hear that rebuttal a lot, just move somewhere else. But, not only can you not just move anywhere else, somebody does own whatever land you would, come upon. But even the
Mm-hmm.
act of moving itself is expensive. I mean, just moving between apartments, me as about to be 24-year-old, Jesus Christ. It
Mm-hmm.
costs a lot for me as a percentage of my income to move between apartments every year.
Yeah. You know what? It also makes me think of this whole van life thing, and us on TikTok are seeing these van life people, and they show their awesome van,
I think that's
and they're
really
showing themselves in some like beautiful, you know, and part of me gets sad about
yeah.
it.
I honestly think it would be a very beautiful life. It's not necessarily something I would, settle on, but could I imagine myself doing something like that if I could for just like, 4 years as a little experiment? Like, yeah, I'd love to get out, see more of the world.
Hmm.
Um, but I
Yeah.
don't really have a job that allows me to be mobile like that.
Tell me about socialism with American characteristics. I've
I
used that
see you
term
look at my
before.
profile.
I did.
Um, so do you know what was his name? Something Zizek. Slavoj Žižek.
Slavoj Žižek.
Yeah. One of the things that he likes to talk about is there isn't really this big bad socialism or big bad communism that often gets brought up in conversations, because if you ask anybody from any part of the world what socialism means to them, it's going to be a different definition, but along the same frame. Like when people say that socialism is where workers control the means of production, to somebody in China, that would for a lot of them reference, corporations that are either directly or indirectly managed by the Communist Party of India and the Soviet
Right.
Union, pretty likewise. Whereas if you ask somebody over in the West, where democracy has been long in place, socialism to them would mean like co-ops, it would mean unions, it would mean mutual aid organizations like Food Not Bombs, uh, what's it, Habitat for Humanity, really stuff like that. So whenever I say that socialism with American characteristics, socialism in America wouldn't resemble like it would in the USSR or in China or
Mm-hmm.
in Cuba. Because in a lot of these places, they haven't, like I said, they haven't had democracy in place for a very long time. And it's very easy for us to judge these governments as authoritarian, as society that has been so ingrained in democracy. But we should also analyze the governments that came before them, like Bautista in Cuba, or the emperor in China, or the whole family of czars in Russia. uh, and I know a lot
Right.
of people
Right.
bring
I
up like, yeah, go ahead, I've been talking a
You
lot.
know what I was saying before you jumped on that a lot of people don't consider the USSR democratic at all,
Mm-hmm.
and they think it was a total dictatorship. But what they had was you would vote for a council. You would vote for that council, and that council would vote for a Politburo who would vote for the premier or whatever. And it's more similar to a parliamentary system where, in a parliamentary system, you don't vote for the prime minister. In the UK, you don't vote for Boris Johnson. You vote for the Tories, or you vote for the Labour Party, and the Labour Party picks who the prime minister is. So although I understand that, and it was way more democratic than what they had previously, I don't think a parliamentary system or a council system would fly here ever. And I
Why
don't
do you
think
think?
promoting that type of radical transition to that type of system would win anybody over here.
Well, I mean, I would beg to differ just because the same kind of arguments have been used in other countries. Like, I was talking with somebody earlier who was saying that the French Revolution was all for naught because what happened after Napoleon ascended to power, fell to power, and a king was put back in place. What they actually uh, the system they transitioned to was a constitutional monarchy in which the rights of the citizenry now had to be recognized and the kind of absolute power was done away with. And likewise, that same trend was seen in other European countries. That's why, like the Magna Carta in the UK was adopted so early, is because it was very dangerous to the feudal lords, to not give everybody enough rights to where they felt like they weren't being oppressed as much. As far
Mm-hmm.
as like, pushing for a parliamentary system in the United States, I would say that education is very important, but also you can see that a lot of Americans don't really fall into the two boxes that we have available, those being Democrats and Republicans. There's a lot of, right wing libertarians. Myself, I would rather vote for the DSA if they were, on the ballots where I live. Um, but
Mm-hmm.
really, I think that's something that has to be come together by the majority of Americans. If the majority of Americans
Mm-hmm.
can recognize that our government doesn't represent us, they should be more motivated to adopt a system like that. I just
Right.
don't really know if
When I
we've been
think
able to test the water or offer that option.
when I think of socialism with American characteristics, I think that we would need to maintain some of the basic framework that we have now. We would still need to vote for like a president, and we would need to
Yeah.
still have like a legislature. I would not want to have something I don't want is the Senate anymore. I think the Senate is one of the worst things within the American system. Like there would have to be major changes. But when I think, we would still have to have branches of government, somewhat
Hmm.
similar to what we have now.
Of course.
Because we have to, yeah, like, because there's a big, and I'm sure you've seen this on TikTok and YouTubers, and a lot of people promote this worker co-op model,
Hmm.
and where there's this like complete detachment between this collection of all these worker co-ops, and the state is kind of like hands off from
Hmm.
these worker co-ops, and they kind of exist um, without each other. And I don't think that that would work, as I also don't think that we could sell this idea talking about a full state ownership of the means of production. That is not going to fly.
Yeah,
And
that
when
would
we
not.
talk about state, when, yeah, and when we talk about state ownership of the means of production, when I think about what has happened in a lot of socialist countries, is that that's supposed to be part of the transition, okay?
Hmm.
The transition is the state expropriates industry from the capitalists, but that process gets halted at that stage because it becomes so embattled, mostly from the outside. And at this point, the state protects itself and protects the progress that it made. And now the state owns everything, and that's what we think of when we talk about socialism. And I think that a lot of socialists, YouTubers, and TikTokers should do a better job of talking about what we want to see past the state ownership stage in the process. What do you think about that?
I will say there's a lot to be said about the transitional states between capitalism, state socialism, socialism. Um, but like I would also like to go back to the point that a lot of these places where socialism rose up, they are coming from a viewpoint that is respected to their history. Like I said, before China had Mao Zedong in the Communist Party of China, they did have an emperor, and so like we are able to recognize authoritarianism where it is, but at the same time, we don't really have the same kind of context. Like to them, authoritarianism might not be as bad to them because they haven't had the same kind of abuses like America had with King George, or was it King George? King George III?
King
Yeah.
George was, yeah, who at the Revolutionary War time, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so what a transition states in like a Western country, how familiar are you with UK politics?
So so.
I remember Jeremy Corbyn said that one of the things that the Labour Party in the UK was going to try to do, had they had enough support, was give workers the right to first refusal. In which, if a business were to make a decision that were to impact the employment of its current, base of workers, that being,
Mm-hmm.
going public and selling its property in the form of stocks, shipping its labor overseas, or adopting automation that would make other people's jobs null and void, that they would have the right to first refusal. And a business would have to go to a buying table first with its workers, and the government would finance the purchase of that company. The co-op, it would form into a co-op, and then the co-op would pay the loan back to the UK government. So
Mm-hmm.
a kind of transition state like you would probably see here in the United States would be something similar to that. Um, as
Right.
far as like
I have heard of that.
how far along we've come in disemploying people through automation and outsourcing, I would say there's a lot to consider, you know, to state acquisition and redistribution of the resources that we have in the industries that we've built up. But the point is that we need to get talking about this, and we're not even all the way there yet.
No. No, we're not. And I did hear about that. You know, it's interesting because in the United States, Bernie Sanders is thought of as being this radical,
Yeah.
and I don't even think he'd be in the left wing of the Labor Party.
No, he would be. I mean, most people in my circle consider him a social democrat, which is closer to like uh, a lot of labor parties in
I think
Europe
you
just
broke
because
up a
they
little bit.
were pushing
I hope
for
I
any.
didn't break up. Who broke
Uh,
up, guys? Oh,
oh,
you broke up for a
there,
second.
I wasn't sure you cut out for a second. Um,
Did I cut out? Oh, maybe it was me.
it was probably both ways.
Okay.
Um, oh, what was I saying?
You were just about to go on about Bernie Sanders and what they consider him in your
Oh,
circle.
he's more like a social democrat because he's not really talking about changing who owns the means of production, as he is talking about how do we use the government to provide a level of welfare for everybody. And in that
Okay.
way, that's what disqualifies him from being a socialist. But he is a social democrat in that he thinks that society should be made to be more social.
100%. I agree. I agree. So let me get you just give your picture of socialism with American characteristics. How do you have any type of framework that you could just kind of put out kind of similar to how I did?
Like what I could imagine it be like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, the transition would look like we get rid of right to work, and we could financially motivate businesses to switch people from the hourly to the salary model. Because they will be on salary, then it makes it easier for them to unionize and go and strike for better wages. Um, and then while also implementing that right to first refusal. So, because we are evaluating policy not by the policy, but by its desired effect, we could see the results that we are looking for and start getting moving in that direction. So let's say, down the line it progresses far enough in which the means of production are all owned by these co-ops of workers that exist. Um, just because of the nature of automation and the scarcity of valuable employment, there would need to be a way to implement a base standard of living. Just because, are we going to start tearing down the machines so people can go back to working miserable factory jobs if we have the means to provide for them? Um, as far as
Okay.
like management of automated industries, I feel like that would have to be handled at a municipal level, and then through a system of taxes either on these co-ops or the co-ops as salaries, or just any kind of tax revenue, we could then
Mm-hmm.
pay specific basic standard of living industries to provide their services, like for instance a
Mm-hmm.
housing co-op similar to Habitat for Humanity, where people offer up their time and effort to build a house in which they then come to own and live in. And albeit they do pay back a loan that is also provided, but there's a lot of cost saving worked into them working to make their own homes. Um, and
Okay.
that's disregarding the fact that we do have 17 million unoccupied homes. Um, as far as like medicine goes, I'm all for single payer just because it's inefficient for doctors to have to communicate between the hospital chair and then with the insurance company, and the customer also with the insurance company and the doctor. It's a very inefficient system in which an unnecessary middleman has been put in there that is going to negotiate on their best interest. Um, Whereas, I don't really care about at which level single payer is carried out through, whether it be municipal, state, or federal. Um, I do think it should be tailored to states' individual needs, just because, the trends in health are different in different areas. Like Colorado is very, very healthy compared to a lot of the rest of the country. And so I mean, that'd be like asking them to foot the bill for somebody else not taking care of their health.
How would the framework be of the government?
Um, I would personally be in favor of a parliamentary system and a single transferable vote. Do you know anything about that?
Tell me about a single transferable vote. Tell me about that.
So I don't remember if it's actually been used anywhere, but it's this idea that whenever you get your ballot, um, for I don't know if it needs to happen for instance, the Board of Education or all the little ones that are on the ballot. Um, but let's say for a presidential election, you had a ballot and you had all the people running for office. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you were to vote for a candidate that is unpopular, and they don't get enough to get past a certain threshold, your votes could be transferred to the second person. So let's say a bunch of people support smaller individuals who they themselves don't have enough to get past that threshold. Whoever their second choice was, based on who performed the worst, starting. So the person who performed the worst in the election, their votes would get transferred to the second person. If that person then got enough to pass
You're
that
talking
threshold,
more of like a ranked choice type thing.
yeah, that's what it is. It's ranked choice.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. My concern is just how much more radically can we change the framework in the United States? You know what I mean?
I mean, I would argue
When I think
that
of,
I would say that ranked choice would be pretty easy to implement because all that would
I
be,
would say so.
yeah. I mean, we keep the electronic ballot counting system, or I mean, we could always just count them by hand too if we wanted to. But all it
Right.
is just
What
once
what are
the
your thoughts on voting third party now?
um that's what I really hate about first past the post because unless there is a huge dynamic shift in either of those two parties, those are the two parties that are going to go around and they over time are slowly going to shift according to their base. But I feel like the Democrats and Republicans are a lot more distant from their baseline than their donors.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you
Right.
ask the average
Yeah.
Democrat voter where they side, they're going to say generally they're going to say they side further left than the Democrat Party. That's why nobody says I love Joe
Mm-hmm.
Biden. I mean, they might not go out and say fuck Joe Biden, but they
Nobody.
love Joe Biden. In the same way, a
Lesser
lot of
evil.
conservatives are voting for Trump, even though Trump would technically be further right than the Republican Party, and that could be seen in the way
Mm-hmm.
that John McCain was treated during the election.
Right. Right. Right.
And John,
Um,
guy who
so
actually President Obama.
yeah. So I would say, and if you are a leftist, you are a socialist, you're an anarchist, um, my argument is that most of us or all of us should stop supporting either of these parties. Um, it makes I feel like when there's not election time, we are out here organizing, educating, agitating, building a movement, and then election time comes and most of us vote for a party that in the first paragraph of the party platform equates socialism with fascism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very counterproductive when there are third parties. I call it third parties, but there are leftist parties that run
Yeah,
for office. And the Green Party since 2016 has become eco-socialist. The PSL runs more and more people. Right where I live in New York City, the PSL is running someone for mayor.
who is the PSL?
And the Party of Socialism and Liberation.
Oh, I don't know New York.
And we need to, yeah, and we need to support our people. And not only should we support them with our vote, but we should get involved to amplify the message. Because let the liberals vote for the liberals, let the conservatives vote for the conservatives. I'm not big on electoral politics because most of the time we're not going to the ballot box and we're not out here, um, you know, like campaigning.
Hmm.
But at election time, if you read What Is to Be Done, Lenin went in depth on why there should be a party and why we should support that party and stop voting for these capitalist parties.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, when it comes to, voting for the two parties in the biggest elections, a lot of people will get cold feet because they are so afraid of the other option. But until there's enough signaling to let us know that, hey, this might actually be possible, that's whenever there's a huge shift. Like I know that was it Jill Stein that ran for president? And she got not
2016.
Jill, who was uh it was the Libertarian Party's guy. I forgot his name, but he got
In 2016?
I don't remember if it was 2016 or 2012, but he got a huge portion of the presidential vote comparatively to the other small parties. Um,
Gary Johnson?
I think it was Gary Johnson. He got a lot of
Yeah,
support, but it didn't equate to much, and it did take away from the Republican vote. And so, likewise,
right.
I don't know if I could get behind people not voting Democrat if it means securing an election for Republican. Does that make sense?
It makes sense and I completely understand it. The problem is, and I'll tell you, so in 2020, I was an organizer with the Howie Hawkins campaign. And part of my project that I led was reaching out to individual DSA chapters and um, and trying to get endorsements from the individual chapters because the DSA national party said if Howie Hawkins loses the primary, they're going to sit out of it and not endorse, but they left it up to the chapters to give into individual endorsements.
Mm.
So I built a team and we reached out to every single DSA chapter in the country. I didn't think we were going to get any endorsements at all. We got 4 endorsements, which is, like I said, 4 more than I thought. And it really, I think it was a positive thing because DSA is so attached at the hip to the Democratic Party. And I could write a book on my criticisms of the DSA, but like it or not, the DSA is the biggest leftist organization in the country,
Yeah.
and they have a lot. They're super active, and if you want to have an inside-outside strategy towards electoral politics, that's way better than just having an inside strategy because what we see
Yeah. I
over and
mean,
over
the reason
again
we're getting
is
these lying politicians is because lose it or loss motivates people to, better signal that they want somebody else. Like I know that I honestly don't know if the DSA would be as popular as they are today if not for the election of Donald Trump. Do I agree with Donald Trump being elected for the sake of the DSA becoming more popular? No, though. But there's a lot of credit there.
sure, sure. And the other thing, every, leftist organization has increased their numbers since Donald Trump. I think the reason the DSA did especially is because they are more social democratic. They are not as radical. And
Mhm.
I involved myself in the DSA. I'm a former DSA. And they're really kind of anti-Marx and anti-socialism, which creates more of a big tent atmosphere than other organizations that are way more specifically Marxist or leftist. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I don't know. I mean, there's something to say positive about the DSA, but at the same time, we see what happens when these DSA people get elected. The party
Yeah,
controls you. You don't you Yeah. So we can
the
say, hey,
time the
the
rich
party's
drink.
going to change you. You're not going to change the party.
Yeah,
And at least support third parties, at least support leftist parties who know that they're not going to get elected. But what, like the Green Party tried to do, what Howie Hawkins was trying to do in 2020 was get 5%. And 5% takes a big hit out of the two-party system. It increases the amount of funding that you would be able to get in the next election cycle. And 5% is actually not hard. I feel like if every leftist joined the campaign and did volunteer work and spread the message and voted for one socialist candidate, I think we would be able to hit 5%. But one thing that a lot of us don't understand, because we're used to these two parties who are controlled completely by oligarchs and billionaires, and a lot of the funding and the work is done for us
Mhm.
by professional campaign workers and professional political strategists. Everyone working for the Howie Hawkins campaign was doing it on a full volunteer basis. Almost everyone was working a full time job. And when you join an organization, say you're going to join DSA, you're going to join a campaign for a socialist candidate for the PSL or the Green Party or whoever, there are no you're not getting millions from any oligarch. You're not get all the work is going to be done by us. And we
Yeah,
realize how little power we have when it's just being done on a volunteer basis, and that we have strength in numbers. And people want to criticize these parties who try to run for office. Join. Like I was leading this project, and I was trying to get a team of 10 people to reach out to every DSA, and it was almost impossible to get people to commit. You know, if we have 10 people, we could reach out to 20, everyone could have 20 DSAs. But
yeah.
people are busy, people are overworked, people want to get paid. And, I understand. But if we want to make progress, we have to at least put some work and some work into this movement and not just post on social media. And I'll just say one more thing. I think social media for the left has been a help and also a detriment to our movement, because I can be on TikTok, I could make Facebook posts, and I could feel like I'm doing something. I'm spreading our message. But it doesn't replace actual organizing in the community. And a lot of people will not organize in the community. They will not join an organization. They will not join a campaign for a leftist candidate because we're out here on social media thinking this is what we're doing. And there's nothing wrong with doing social media activism, but we have to actually do actual work, material work.
So when it comes to like actual political work and social media outreach, I would say that those are two different actions in having a harvest of political power. I would say social media is kind of like planting seeds. Like you and me here talking about these issues in front of an audience, that is like planting seeds because they can hear our arguments. If they take anything away that might change their minds, it makes them, uh, it's almost like fertilizing a field. And in the same way, once
Yeah.
you have a fertilized field, then you can start to plant seeds and start to actually have political change. You can start to have organizing. You can start to have mutual aid. And from there, that's whenever we get the political power. Like I would say that a lot of the younger generation is, more so siding leftist specifically because this is where they will see political activity. Whereas, like, unless, they're watching the news on a regular basis, um, or putting themselves around political organizations from a young age, they're not going to have anybody outreaching to them. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like, I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And the other thing that you make me think of when you talk about having this conversation and planting seeds is the critique on debating. Um, there's a lot of critique that is very valid on the act of having the debate, with whether you're debating libertarians or conservatives or any type of reactionary. A lot of people say it's absolutely not worth doing. It's a waste of time. It gives platforms to the far right, and it shouldn't happen. But I think that when you go into it and you have the idea, like you said, of planting seeds of this is for the audience. This is not to change that person's mind.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to
I mean,
realize that we live in what's that?
It's the reason why, like during the American Revolution, they were making pamphlets for everybody, so they could get out the message that they want independence from the United States. It's not so much that you have to go and change the minds of reactionaries. You need to change the minds of people that are viable for political change, people that are on the
Right.
fence, or that they believe arguments, but they don't know how to defend them because, I mean, the defense was shaky to begin with.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. And so I engage in debate, and I engage the debate from a strictly socialist perspective. I try to keep it there and be as broad as I can at that point. I don't want to be like, identify as a Marxist Leninist or Trotskyist or any of those smaller tendencies,
Hmm.
because identifying as one of those smaller tendencies, I think, just makes people confused.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? And I think we have these sock dems and we have these guys like Vosh debating who I think that I've even watched, yeah, I've watched Vosh debate. You know Vosh, right?
I'm sorry. I can't say that.
Vosh, he's a big YouTuber. He identifies as a socialist, but he supports imperialism. He he's just weird, and
Yeah.
he's
Well, that's
great
what.
with yeah, he's like phenomenal with debating like the far right, and he gets into it with them, and he's one of the best. But when he speaks to another leftist, he really shows some really disgusting ideas.
Mhm.
It's pretty bad. But in our society, I think it's important to get into this and have this performance for others to see, to defend our ideas. Um, so yeah, that's one of the reasons I do it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. When I came on your chat and I saw, your tagline, my first thought was, oh, maybe this is somebody to the right of the aisle, just because you put liberal. Usually, that's not really
Yeah,
a term thrown out as a hook for an audience unless they are on the right side.
right, right. And I'm glad that you came on, and that's kind of what I'm going for. I'm just trying to exclude a certain type of far right conspiracy uh,
Oh,
person. You know what I mean?
yeah, last night on the live that I did, I actually brought on somebody who had a differing viewpoint, but the entire time that we are talking, there's this guy in the comments with a Pepe the Frog picture, and in his profile, he said,
Mm,
unapologetically misogynist. And yeah, I could totally
yeah,
understand wanting to bring somebody like that on the air.
yeah, yeah. I mean, although I've debated libertarians, and I really enjoy debating libertarians. I've read a lot of Ayn Rand and I've read Milton Friedman. I was debating a libertarian last week, and I've read, and I started talking about what I've read from Ayn Rand and Milton Friedman. And I was like, do you agree with that? And this guy hadn't read any economic theory from
That's
this
how it is.
ideology that yeah, he's read nothing. So he's probably watched some YouTube and said, "This is what I am." And I was like, "Do you agree with that? That's disgusting." And he was like, "I don't agree with that." And I'm like, "Well, keep on being teachable, keep on learning. Don't be stuck here." Um, so I think that there's a use in debating all sorts of people. The ultra nationalists, the fascists. I'm trying to avoid that, and that's why I go for liberals. I get a different group of people, and even some leftists that we can have this kind of conversation you and I are having. That is, I think, really productive.
I would say that reading literature from both sides, if you can narrow it down to both, but reading a lot of literature while I was in high school is specifically why I've been so cemented. When I was growing up, until I took this one class in AP Euro with this teacher, threw a pamphlet out from every person from every point during Renaissance up to industrial, not industrial, I should say. No, it was up into industrial. He just threw pamphlets at us like every week. Here, read this. Tell me what you think. Here. I remember I read Rousseau, Jean Locke. Um, I think there might have been Milton Friedman in there, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Um, I don't remember if Proudhon was in there. Also, this one uh, anarchist. I mean, there were tons of them. But the one
Sounds
that I
awesome.
took away prior to that class, being a Christian, conservative, basic person who believes what he was told from a young age, I walked away. I was like, holy shit. I
Hmm.
learned so much in just the course of one class that I did a total flip on nearly everything I believed. Um,
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Hey, so I want to thank you so much, Jake. I'm gonna have to jump
yeah,
off, but yeah, hopefully I see you again on here and we can continue the conversation.
yeah. I'll pop in whenever I see your live on. Here you go.
All right, awesome. Thanks. All right, and thank you all for checking me out, Jake. I'll give you a follow too.
I appreciate
All
it.
right. All right, awesome. All right, you all have a good day, and I will see you later.